The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts Allison Furno and Debi Vandenboom.
Today's topic is college, indoctrinating or eye-opening. And I have with me special guest, Sam Oriza, who I've known for a very long time. And Sam is part of our civics ministry here. She's a leader in our faith, our TPUSA faith group, and my guest co-host as well on Into the Fire. And she's been at this church for a very long time, but I'm so glad to have you with me today.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about who you are, since you're new to this group, right? You haven't been on the podcast before, so just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yes.
And how you got involved in all of this stuff that you're doing.
I know, right? I kind of looked back and I was like, wait, how did I get here? Well, hello, everyone. I am Sam Oriza. My parents were actually on this podcast a few episodes ago. I'm the oldest daughter of two amazing parents, but really kind of how I got into this. Growing up, we were a conservative family, but I really didn't know what that meant until I got to college. Always grew up in the church, always in church. That was in Bible quiz. And so I had these values kind of written on my heart, right? And so I'd always knew what I believed and why I believed them, but I didn't know why it was so important. And I didn't know why it was important to be active about telling people, which I think is like the next step, right? Yeah. But yeah, so growing up, loved America. We sang God Bless the USA, waking up every morning, basically. But
you gotta bed.
Yeah, no, seriously. And so like right when I get to college and I see everybody is like not like me, I'm like, wait, what?
Right.
But yeah, through life. How
long have you been? You said you've been at this church your whole life, or you guys moved here from?
Yes. Well, I say my whole life because that's really as far back as I can remember. Born in California, but moved here when I was 5. Okay. So raised in Arizona. We went to, I think, one other church before we found Scottsdale First Assembly. Okay. And then Phoenix First Assembly, formerly known.
And Scottsdale First Assembly is now our Scottsdale campus in Dream City. Yeah.
Yes. So I've been here a long time. Before Dream City was Dream City, I like to say to people.
And you and I met a long time ago because we were at the same homeschool organization. Yes. I was teaching, you were my TA 1 year of teaching elementary school math.
Yes, where I fell in love with science.
Yeah, and so with that, you were homeschooled.
Yes.
So, but you ended up going to college. I know a lot of people don't think that homeschoolers end up going to college, but you did.
I was an anomaly.
Yeah, I don't think you were an anomaly. I think a lot of them do. I think you get a better education, honestly, homeschooling, than a lot of people do.
Yes.
It's not always the case, but solid education. And so when you went to college, what did you want to do when you went to college? And where did you went to a Christian college, right?
Yes, I went to a Christian college in Oregon, George Fox University, and I studied cell and molecular biology because I wanted to do cancer research.
Simple, right?
Yeah, I know, right? I know, back to the sciences. But cancer research was something I was really passionate about, still am really passionate about, and cancer education for people. But then kind of, I know we'll get into this, but in college, my whole life kind of turned around, and I still am in the sciences and I love it, but cancer research in the lab is not really what I'm doing anymore. But so cell molecular biology in Oregon.
Okay.
Which was very interesting.
And you were, and it's interesting too, because so this is something for people to pay attention to as well, because you said at the beginning, you were talking about how you loved America, you were very patriotic, you know, you understood all these things, but then you go to a Christian university.
Yes.
And the people that are there do not have your same worldview and your same set of values. Is that accurate?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So
with that, you were able to hold on to your faith. A lot of kids, there's this statistic. We had an episode with Josh Moza from our college here. And I forget what the statistic was, but it's very high that most students who go to college, they if they're raised in the church, they go to college, they walk away from their faith. That number is very high. You did not do that. You came back even stronger, right?
Yes.
And more determined and more, solid in your beliefs.
Yes.
How did that happen? How did you break that statistic?
Yes. Let's take it back to 2020. So I was in college, a freshman in 2018, and then I graduated in 2022. So COVID happened right smack in the middle.
Yeah.
But so going to this Christian university, I knew the standards and their beliefs that they were supposed to uphold, right?
Right.
This is why I chose this university. They had a great science program. I was so excited. I still do love them. Don't get me wrong. But I was in my sophomore year, and spring break was happening. And that was just when everybody got the message, we're taking 2 weeks for spring break because COVID outbreak happened. Okay, great. I come back home, and literally the day that I got home, I got an email from my university saying, you need to be out of the dorms. And so I'm like, no, I'm in Arizona. I have to go back to Oregon. So my mom and I fly back to Oregon, pack up my room, and drive back. And this was like at the height of the COVID craziness. Like, even in that moment, I was really scared. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I was a science major, so I kind of knew like about bacteria and viruses and like what's going on. I watched Contagion the week before. Like I was all on lock it down, like crazy. Like, let's go home, like stay indoors. And so I go home, and like all my friends,
was not good timing.
Yeah, right. No, I know. I was like the one telling my friends like, we need to wear masks, like stay indoors, all these things. And I go home, and I'm in my science classes, we're online. And in my biology class, we were assigned to actually read the scientific journal that the Wuhan lab posted about their COVID trials.
Right. And
which, looking back now, I'm like, I should have saved that somewhere. Like, I probably won't be able to find that exact document. But I
know if you had known then, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I was like,
yeah.
screenshot everything.
Yes.
But in scientific journals, they always start with an abstract, which is like the summary of what they're going to be talking about. And then there's an introduction, which I like to call my little biology snippet. It's basically the background about what you're going to be reading. And in that article, I started reading, and my eyes started opening a little bit, because everything I had heard up until that point about COVID was novice. It was so new, like, we have no idea like how bad it's going to be. So everybody just needs to go home and stay indoors. And I'm like on board with that, right? Like I get it. And then I'm reading this article, and I'm like, oh, wait, COVID is actually SARS-CoV-2, which is a strain of SARS, which is connected to colds and flus and different things we had been studying for over 20 years.
Right.
And I was like, wait a second. Okay, now I need to compare everything that like I know in the science and what they're telling the public. And I started asking questions in class, because we were learning at the time how viruses are transmitted, how your body deals with infection, like all of these things. And so I'd started asking questions and was immediately like shut down. And was told, nope, like the experts, that was a word I learned to despise. The experts like have it under control. Like we just need to listen to them. And I'm like, okay, I was at the time, second year undergrad, having these questions like, what? This is weird. Okay, so then as any Gen Zer does, I go to social media and start posting, and then realize all of my peers, not all of my peers, because I had some good friends around me, but most of them disagreed with my point of view. And I was like,
And you're just asking questions.
I'm just asking questions. I was posting like on my Instagram story, like, how do you feel about this lockdown? Like, what have you heard? Because I was also trying to find information. Everybody I knew was in Oregon.
Right.
And I was in Arizona. So also that difference was like
very different.
It was also, so I was like, what's it really like? And so I was kind of just asking questions of what people were hearing and just trying to piece the story together, even for myself. And so in doing that, I had realized that a lot more people my age would rather be told what to do than think for themselves and have a choice about something. And that was something that really struck me to my core, because I was like, as an American, like,
right.
I feel like that is like an oxymoron. Like,
right.
Those two things like don't go together. I don't want to be told what to do. Like, I want to have the freedom to have the choice and all these things, right? And so I kind of was like, oh no, wait, what's going on? And so,
I just before you move on from there, but I mean, people my age and older, I was shocked. I've said this before on this show. We talked to somebody else. Another episode, I think it was with Patriot Barbie, and we were talking because that's part of her story of getting active had to do with COVID lockdowns in that same part of the country that you're talking about.
Yes,
I forget
the Pacific
if she was
Northwest,
in Washington or Oregon, but I think she was in she was either in Washington or Oregon. I can't remember now. But anyway, and I was like, we said then, I was shocked at how many people just fell in line, and it was like, okay, like you. It's like a lot of this stuff does not make sense.
Right.
How is it, a tiny virus going to be stopped by a mask when it's too small to, like, it's so much smaller than the holes in the mask and, just the fabric and whatever, those kind of questions. And you weren't allowed to ask questions. It was, I was really shocked at how many people just fell in, let's believe the experts and let's do all that. So it wasn't
gosh. I was like, isn't the point of class to ask questions?
Well, right. Well, and you would think, right, that, I mean, I can kind of understand older people, right, who are used to the news telling them things, right, and that you kind of get conditioned to believe the news, believe what you're being told, believe the government, right? That was... one of my favorite lines from Stranger Things was like, what's the government? Of course they're going to tell us the truth. But that was a whole side little bunny trail my mind went on.
Thought train.
But it's true, though. A lot of people do think that way. They think, I don't know that so much now. I feel like in the last 4 years, people's eyes have been opened.
Yes.
But you would think that on a college campus is supposed to be where you question things, where you learn, and you try to see other points of view and learn things. But you were not experiencing that.
Right. It was the one thought train and everybody get on or honestly, you're going to fail. So I did have to finesse some of my papers.
Science.
Yes.
Right,
which, side note, was funny. The other day I was having a conversation with someone and they were like, there's no way they can push propaganda through their biology class. And I was like, let me tell you firsthand, it's possible. So I was just reading these and going through and kind of piecing this all together and talking with my peers and realizing all of that. And I started talking to my parents and my mom was like, have you heard of Charlie Kirk? And I was like, no, who is that? She was like, oh, he has a podcast. And I was like, who listens to podcasts? Thank you, everybody listening. But I'd started listening to podcasts of the Charlie Kirk show. And I was like, oh my gosh, everything he's saying is makes sense and is what I was thinking, right? And because I'm also obsessed with logic. And so I was really these things are not lining up. And it was really getting to me, I call it my spiritual riff. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not right. And it was bothering me that this is what was being told to people. So, I started going down the path of looking into what it would be like to start a Turning Point chapter at my school. But really beating the statistic all came down to having the good people around me to keep being in my ear of what you're saying. Everybody I was talking to about what I was thinking, they were like, yeah, what you're saying kind of makes sense, because nobody was in the sciences at the level I was. So they were like, no, what you're saying makes sense. And so having good faith people around you to encourage you, I think, is really important. But honestly, my biggest thing was my turning point team that I ended up having. Like my leadership team, we went through a lot together in Oregon. So that was honestly the start of it all for my activism journey.
Yeah. And so what was that like? So you had a turning point, because Turning Point, TPUSA, there's different components to TPUSA, because there's TPUSA, that there are college campus chapters.
Yep.
There's also TPUSA Faith, which we have a chapter of that here. That's more of a faith-based
out of
chapter.
churches.
But you had a college chapter.
Yes.
At your school, and so you founded that. Did you start it? You started the charter, and
yes.
Okay.
So at the end of Charlie Kirk's podcast, he always shouts out Turning Point USA, and so I just went online and I was like, well, how would I even start a chapter? I really didn't even know what that looked like, and just went online and started filling things out. And I think you only needed a vice president, I think, like in order to get your chapter started. But they have like a representative reach out to you who's in your region, and you kind of get it started from there. My biggest issue wasn't actually getting it started through Turning Point, my chapter. It was getting it started through my university, the club portion, to be like recognized as a real chapter from my university. Well, I think it was kind of funny because I'm like, the Lord is so funny. When I was filling out all of my initial like club like requests and all the things, like what is your club gonna do? Like how many people are you gonna have? Because also you get like club stipend money from the university too. So it's like, would you want stipend money? What would you use it for? Like all these things, right? And so it's kind of vague and what we would be doing, and so because I was hesitant that we'd be shut down just because of what I've known of my university.
At your Christian university.
At my Christian university, yes. So
that just really bothers me.
I know.
Okay. Keep going.
So we were online when I had applied to be a club. So then I had gotten approved, and then we were one, I think, of maybe 2 schools in the entire state of Oregon who went back to in-person classes that fall. Hybrid, some in person, some online. Okay. But so we were all on the college campus still, though. Right. So we all came back to school. And it wasn't until we started like tabling and having club events that we really started to get traction, and the university started to take notice of us.
Causing trouble.
Yes, I know. It's my favorite. But I'll never forget, actually. There was this one time we were tabling. That's when you set up a table outside somewhere in a high traffic area on your campus, and you have pins, stickers, posters, different things that have like catchphrases on them. Not like, well, I was going to say like Make America Great Again, but it wasn't like that. It was all...
But they're not that, like, none of them are
They're
crazy.
not, no, they're not. They're all 501c3, so not political, but it just, not political. What am I trying to say? Like,
well, there was nothing. They weren't partisan.
Yes, they weren't partisan.
Meaning that it's not Republican, Democrat, right? But they're just patriotic.
Yes. So there's phrases like
marriage and family.
Socialism sucks.
Socialism, right.
Taxation is theft.
Right.
Things like that.
Right. So it's not anything really confrontational or dramatic.
Right. Or
it shouldn't be.
Okay.
It
right.
should not be, but it is. It's yeah.
Yes. So we had a "Don't Tread on Me" sign with the snake, which if you look up the actual like history of it, it's like way back from England
when the colonies.
Yes.
Right? It was.
I'm like, whoa, wait. When I did the actual research on it, because we were tabling one day, we had that sign. I get an email from our club's director, and like 4 other people from the admin are CC'd on it. And I was like, oh no, okay, I'm getting called into the principal's office basically. So they were like, we need to have a talk with you and your vice president. Can you please come in and have a discussion with us? We're like, okay, like, sure. And I was asking what is this about? And it was like, oh, things that you had on your table on whatever day. And I was like, okay.
The Constitution,
Literally pocketbook constitutions, like, yeah. So American flags.
How dare you?
I know. So my vice president and I go into this meeting, and I had no idea what we would really be walking into. But my favorite thing about Turning Point was that they were a 501c3. So my sole job was literally just to educate students on free markets, fiscal responsibility, and basically like American values, right? So that was will die on this hill. There's nothing you can do. Like, I'm not promoting anything like bad, right? So we go into this meeting, and our club's director is asking me about the "Don't Tread on Me" sign. And I was kind of like, why is he asking me about this? Well, it turns out that we were a sanctuary campus. And so if you don't know what a sanctuary campus is, that means that they do not help the government or enforce government laws when it comes to undocumented citizens. And so the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, apparently there was undocumented immigrants at our school, and it made them feel unsafe. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, well, what did you tell them when they told you it made them feel unsafe? That they were okay in their feelings, like basically like condoning kind of how they were feeling. And I was like, but are we helping them maybe take action so that they won't feel unsafe anymore? Like, or like start the process like with them. I don't really know what that looks like, but I was like, why am I the one that's being like called in trouble because it made them feel like they couldn't walk around on campus if we were out there because it made them feel unsafe. And I was just like, okay. Well, I don't know what you want me to do about that, but it was basically I couldn't have that sign anymore. But that one sign, I couldn't have that one sign or any stickers that had that phrase on it anymore. And I was just like, this is what I'm talking about. We need to have conversations with people, though. Because I also asked them, because I feel like, especially when I'm tabling, I'm pretty like open and bubbly, always standing in front of the table.
Right, you're not being aggressive or
and
mean.
we really want people to like come up and talk to us because we're like, we want to engage in conversation. Like that's like the best part of tabling.
Right.
And so I had asked them like, have you encouraged her to like try to come talk to me or whoever it is, like that I can have a conversation with them about why maybe they're feeling unsafe? And they were like, no, we can't do that. And I was like, okay. So we don't really want to solve the problem.
Right.
I was like, yeah. So
we just want to make you be quiet.
Yes.
Right.
But I have so many stories that I could probably keep going on. But yeah, so just things like that where the administration wasn't a helping hand, I would say.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. And so did you have any other kind of problems with like events or things that you did that
yes, well,
created a stir?
Also, actually, in Oregon, this is what my family lives in Phoenix. So I used to tell my mom when I was in school, like, it's so different up here, like mask mandate wise, like even being able to go inside for a long time. So we had to wear masks until I think February of 2022.
Okay.
Which was that was my spring senior year. And so anytime you wanted to have an event inside at school, there were a bunch of different rules that you had to follow, but it was kind of, stay 6 feet apart. Okay.
Right.
They're standing 4 feet apart. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? It was like things like that. And we would have people come to our events because and try to video and like take pictures of people not wearing masks, turn it in. And every single time I'd literally just have to go in. And I just told them, I was like, I'm not the mask police. I was like, there was food there. People were eating and then they didn't put their mask on when they took that photo. I'm like, we can go in this circle a bunch, but things like that. There was one time we were going to do it was like a slice of the pie. It was a debt event, basically teaching people about our national debt and how it's just, compounding. Completely out of control, right? Yes. And so normally, like the process where you would apply for getting your money from the university to pay for an event, whoever was in charge, my junior year of the chapter, the girl actually who was the club's director ended up coming to our Turning Point event, but the girl my senior year, she was not a Turning Point fan. And so every time we would apply for funds, she would literally just shut us down. And so thankfully Turning Point is awesome and they stepped in and would help out. But things like that where administratively we would be shut down or I would just have to go in and defend myself a lot.
You got called in.
Yes. The mayor of the town that my university is in wanted to meet with me because we were just causing such a ruckus in the little town, having our little meetings.
Well, because these meetings were not like thousands of people, right?
No, it was like, I think maybe our most had like 80, which that was kind of a lot for that one. But we had a guest speaker. But that was like nothing crazy. We had the biggest auditorium in the campus, and there was 80 people in there. Like,
well, so I'm saying we're not talking about like 10,000 people in a thing. So the fact that you're causing a stir with 80 people is pretty revealing.
Yes.
So what did the mayor want to talk to you about?
I think he was just getting a lot of flack. Well, because also the area of Oregon is very high LGBTQ plus community. And so there was always, I feel like, a bad riff between that community and like our club.
Okay.
And I don't know why, because like we never did anything right. And so I think it was just a bad stereotype that they had in our heads, which a lot of the times when people would come up and talk to me and they'd be like, you're actually so nice. And I'd be like, yeah, I am a nice person. I was like, just because I love America doesn't mean I'm horrible. Like, but so they would have protests like in the main square of where our town was. And a few times we've tabled near that area. And yes, because of like the way the campus is, it's like right across from the street. And so we had tabled a few times. And I just think he did not want the attention brought on him because people in his town were coming to him and being like, why are these kids allowed to do this? Like, I didn't end up taking the meeting because I was like, no, I'm okay. I was like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I'm going to keep running my chapter, hanging out with my friends, learning more about America. Like, I was like, I don't want to deal with that.
And so even now after, so all of that led into, you ran that chapter for how many years?
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
And then you came back here. Mm-hmm. You've been super involved in ministry here, been helping. So all of the different civics ministry events that we've done, you've been part of that and helping that. So you still have that passion.
Yes, I do.
You did not end up going into the sciences, right?
No, yes.
And so what is your current, like, what do you want to see happen in this?
Well,
with your especially with your generation, because I feel like this is a big thing, right? That we need to. We had a podcast that we had with my daughter, with Eden, and talking about communism and the way the Gen Z tends to see. You're on the older end of Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
But in not understanding. Although there are a lot of conservatives your age, and
there
younger.
are, and well, here is another thing I'll say really quick is a downfall, I think, of social media is a lot of times it makes you feel really alone sometimes in the things, thoughts that you are thinking and beliefs that you have. And something that Turning Point first showed me was that so many college kids my age actually thought the way that I did. Just so happened my college campus it's like few and far between, but that community, that other kids are actually thinking this. But sorry, back to your first part of your question. What was that again?
What it doesn't. You're fine.
Oh,
I was
okay.
asking about how we, how much. So there are a lot more conservatives than we think that there are.
Right. Yeah. But out of all of this, my biggest thing now is literally educating young people, and because even still, it was in the past presidential election before all the primaries and everything. I was having a conversation with some kids and they didn't even know who some of the presidential candidates were. And I was like, wait, you guys are voting this year. This really concerns me. I think we need to start talking about this like in our daily conversation. Like even things like that.
You should just know who their names.
Right? I know. I was like, this is a little concerning. But this is everybody who's running. This is like where they stand, their policies, whatever, right? So, but really is educating young people because, and not only like why America is so important and why it's so great, but on a personal level, why it's so important for the world that we have America, and from all the way back from starting from Christian values, and how we impact the world when we're a functioning country and society. So,
because we do either really impact the world for good or for bad, right? I mean, right now we're one of the leading, exporters of porn and trafficking and things like that. But we've also been, who does the world turn to when there's a disaster somewhere? It's like those groups come from America largely, and missionaries going out, organizations doing disaster relief,
100%.
Hospital organizations, all kinds of different things that have been good that have come out of America when we're functioning well and when we have the right value system.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that does start within the church, right? We've got to be
100%.
in there, and then making sure we understand how that civic foundation works and what our part is in it.
Yeah.
So with that, right? So you take your faith, you those firmly held beliefs that we have, and we need to go into the world, into all the world, right? Which includes into the halls of government and making that impact and having where those beliefs are impacting the schools and they're impacting city government and they're impacting nonprofits and they're impacting wherever we are, right? Our job places. We see, if you're really paying attention, all of those things really, they're intertwined.
Yes,
but so many people don't really pay attention to that. And I think especially when you're younger, you don't see the effects of it as much.
Oh, 100%.
Because you just are in, and you're in school.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever.
Well, you're also in your little bubble, right?
Right.
Too.
Which I think a lot of people stay in that bubble for a long time. But until you really get out and you get married and you have kids and you work in the the workplace for a long time or whatever, you start to see more and more and more. I mean, a lot of those things just come with time and experience where you see them.
Yeah.
But then you do have young people who are super sharp and on top of it and know exactly what they're talking about from a very young age. So, and you have older people who still are clueless. So, there's really not an age factor in that.
Yeah.
But with that, what places do you recommend that people get educated? Because this is I've said this before on this show when we first started, that when I first started, I was an adult. I was in my 20s and I knew nothing about any of this stuff. So I didn't know how any of the civic. I don't even know what I learned in high school. I'm not sure if. I believe I had a class.
Well, most people don't
I could not
even have it now.
So I couldn't tell you one thing I learned. So I knew nothing, right? But all of a sudden it hit me. I really need to know. I need to know and understand how all of this stuff works and how does what the government is doing impact my life and my kids' lives and do we know that the experts are telling us the truth, or that the news media is telling us the truth? How do we find that stuff out? And it can be very overwhelming and daunting, because
100%.
that's the other reason too why people don't engage, is because it feels just so enormous and overwhelming.
Yeah.
So where do you recommend that people get started to get some information?
Definitely. It feels like it's like you're drinking out of a fire hose.
Yes.
But PragerU is really awesome because there is so much information out there. They have short videos. I think maybe some of them are like 5 minutes long, and super informative, like straight facts on how things just work in the government.
Right.
And so it's like
on communism, on the economy, on
everything. The economy, how markets work, like everything. So that one was great. Another thing, if you're trying to keep up to date on like just what's going on in the world, because that is a daunting task in itself to figure out, especially with you have your own life going on, right? Is the Morning Wire podcast, 15 minutes in the morning, and they have like straight facts of the highest news stories going on.
I listened to that as
well.
I like that.
I love that one. I think it's so great.
It's very to the point. It doesn't drag on.
No. And yeah, so I think those are great. Charlie Kirk podcast is great. This podcast is great.
Listen to us.
Yes. But it just starts. I tell people all the time, you can't do it all, right?
Right.
You start with something. Find one thing that just captures your heart, right? Because you also want to do something that like you're passionate about and that you like. So I was like, for me, it's talking to young people and science, healthcare. So like making sure our healthcare system is treating the American people appropriately, right? Like that's something I like to do. My mom, her passion is the school boards, and
mine
so
is
my
life issues.
Yours is life issues. My dad serves as a precinct committeeman, and so it's like we all do something,
right? You
to
don't have to
help,
do everything,
right? You can't do everything, so just find the one thing that you're passionate about, and just
step out and try.
Step out and try, because the Lord will just keep building on what you have, right? Before I was like, I would never think that I would be a chapter president. Sometimes when I tell people, I'm like, oh yeah, it was so funny. But he says, give me what's in your hands. And it's crazy what he'll do. Now it's 5 years later, and so
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and we will be hearing more from Sam here in the future too on this show. And thank you for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify, and follow us on social media. Find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.